Hello, and welcome to my top 10 best and worst movies of 2022. I'm a bit late with this, but I wanted to get it out there. I'm gonna go my 10th worst movie, my 10th best, my ninth worst, and my ninth best, and so on. But I want to start with a few honorable mentions. So, my honorable mentions for the best movies of the year are After Sun, 13 Lives, The Lost City, The Fablemans, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, Nope, The Northman, The Black Phone, and Banshees of Inisherin. My honorable mentions for the worst movies of the year are Take My Hand, Disenchanted, Crimes of the Future, Ice Age: The Adventures of Buck Wild, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Photocopier. But let's just get into the top 10. I'm going to try to keep this brief because it's not a full review of all the movies. It's just a little rundown of the best and worst of the year. My number 10 for the worst movies of 2022. I feel like this is pretty rough. It's Apollo 10 and a half, A Space Age Childhood. This feels very harsh because it's not a bad movie per se. I hate documentaries. Like, I find them to be mind numbingly boring. This isn't a documentary, but it's told almost like a documentary. And I just felt this movie went nowhere. I think it's so boring. And I just could hardly stay awake. My number 10 for the best movies of the year, that is Cha Cha Real Smooth. And this is one of the most charming movies I have ever seen. I don't feel like it maybe lands the boat, or whatever you want to say. It doesn't end in the most satisfying way, but it's so charming, and I love the central relationship. I love the performances, and I think Cooper Raiff is just absolutely magnificent. My number 9 for the worst movies of the year is I Am Zlatan. It is a movie about Zlatan Ibrahimovic. I barely saw anyone talk about this, but I hated this movie. Zlatan Ibrahimovic is one of my favorite football players of all time. And what he is known for is he is arrogant, but he is, I would more say, confident, and he is an incredible athlete, an incredible footballer. What this movie does is portray him as a complete idiot, a violent maniac, and a thief. And instead of giving him this character arc where he matures and grows into something better and grows into this world star that he is, this isn't really a spoiler. The movie ends with him stealing another bike. It's mind numbingly dumb. And my number 9 for the best movies of the year is The Good Nurse. Now, I was enthralled by this movie. The performances from Jessica Chastain and Eddie Redmayne are sublime. I feel like Eddie Redmayne is he gives one of the best performances of the year. He is so conniving and so evil and so effective. My number 8 for the worst movies of the year is a Danish movie called Nothing. And this is sort of about teen rebellion, and in one sense, the reason it's bad is just because it's utterly forgettable. But it also just annoyed me with the acting, the dialogue, and what's going on screen is just crossing so many lines to the point where a teenage girl is basically raped because of a dare. Number 8 for the best movies of the year is, funnily enough, also a Danish movie. This is Speak No Evil, the absolute best horror movie of the year. This is both the best horror movie of the year, one of the best movies of the year, and maybe the first movie ever where I said I never want to watch that again. This is absolutely disgusting, and there are some scenes that you just cannot get out of your head. It is absolutely gross, but it's so effective. It's so scary, and just so off-putting in every sense of the word. Number 7 for the worst movies of the year is Judd Apatow's The Bubble. I could barely even get through this movie. It is a comedy that is just in no ways funny. It takes you back to the time of the pandemic, which is just what you want to forget. And like, there's been movies this year that have been great, that has commented on or had lockdown as a part of that. I'm talking about Glass Onion, if you're wondering. Glass Onion and Knives Out Mystery. where it's not like it played into the movie. It was just a part of it, and that was fine. But in this movie, it's such a big part of it, and I just don't want to go back to that time and remember that. Other than that, it's just how can you have a director in Judd Apatow and this cast, which is amazing, and still have a comedy that is so utterly unfunny. Number 7 for the best movies of the year is Bullet Train. Now, I loved this movie. This is maybe the funniest movie of the year. It's in competition with the next movie on the best list. It was so funny. The action is brilliantly choreographed. I love the direction. I love the performances. I think Channing Tatum, his little cameo in this is so hilarious. Channing Tatum for me is one of the actors who's had the best year. It's just an incredible movie. I love Lemon and Tangerine. Maybe it goes a bit off the rails in the ending, but I don't really care. I had so much fun with this. It's almost the perfect action movie. Number 6 for the worst of the year. This is very controversial. Triangle of Sadness. I hated this movie from beginning. Oh, not beginning. From after like the first 15-20 minutes, I hated this. In the beginning, there were I think some interesting questions about society and gender roles and stuff like that. After that, this movie seemed like it had no direction whatsoever. There was no cohesion. It's just things happening after each other with no through line at all, which is amplified by the fact that this movie has no ending. At one point, it just stops. Nothing had, and there's been no resolution whatsoever. And it is just like with The Bubble, it's a comedy that is painfully unfunny. Like when people laughed at the vomiting sequence in this movie, I got physically angry and wanted to punch them because I just didn't find it funny at all. And not just like, okay, well, that's their type of humor, it's not mine. I can't understand why anyone would find that scene funny. Number 6 for the best movies of the year is All Quiet on the Western Front. This is the most realistic war movie I have ever seen. Like, the story in this is so effectful. It's incredible. The acting, the performances are phenomenal. The direction, incredible. Everything about this movie just screams almost the perfect action movie. It takes just a little bit to get going and before I was fully invested, but after the beginning, I was just hooked, and this is one of the best movies of the year. If if the name of the video and the list didn't tell you that already. Number 5 for the worst movies of the year. Once again, this is controversial, and not because of the quality of the movie. It's Fire Island. And I do not want to be discriminating anyone. I have a great deal of respect for the LGBTQ community and everyone who's homosexual and all that stuff. I have a great deal of respect for those people. I just don't like watching it. You can be whatever you want to be. I totally respect it. I just don't want to witness it. You can think about that what you want, really. This movie just wasn't for me. I didn't know what it was before I started watching it, and I just didn't enjoy it at all. 5 for the best movies of the year is The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. Now, this is the movie that's in competition with Bullet Train for the funniest movie of the year. I loved this. The way that it can just mess with itself and have so much fun with its premise was so hilarious. I loved Nick Cage in this movie. I love Pedro Pascal. I love their dynamics and their relationship. And it has a great little story. Maybe the premise and the story is a bit generic. Who cares? It's so much fun with such great performances, brilliant dialogue, and the scene where they're on LSD, one of the best sequences of the year. My number 4 for the worst movies of the year is De Forbandede År 2, or as I think it's called in English, Out of Darkness. But don't hang me up on that. This is another Danish movie, and The first movie came out a few years ago and I despised it. I hated it. So I had no expectations for this. And somehow this movie managed to be even worse. This cast is some of the best actors we have in Denmark, and I've seen some of them deliver brilliant performances before. So I have no earthly idea why everyone in this movie is so laughably bad. Every performance is terrible. The dialogue is awful, and the editing is some of the most confusing and distracting editing I have ever seen. And my number four for the best movies of the year is Elvis. I loved this movie. I did a huge Baz Luhrmann binge just before watching it. I hadn't seen any of his movies, and I wasn't a huge fan. Like, I respect the craft, and some of the movies were okay or maybe even good. This is by far Baz Luhrmann's best movie ever. I feel like the lifestyle of Elvis and the style of filmmaking from Baz Luhrmann go together so well, and he's just able to bring this massive story to life in a way that I don't really know if any other director could do in this way. It's just a perfect match. It's the best performance of the year by Austin Butler, and I just loved it. I loved every second of this. My number three for the worst movies of the year is How I Fell in Love with a Gangster. This is a Polish crime drama. It's 3 hours long, and it has 0 seconds of entertainment. It is so insanely boring that I barely even know how to put it into words. It's 3 hours of nothing. The only positive I have is that the cinematography is pretty good. That's the one good thing I have to say about this. And my number three for the best movies of the year is Top Gun Maverick. This was always going to be on the list. I think the original Top Gun is a fine movie. It's not the best. It's pretty good. This is just better in every single way. And this is one of those movies that I feel like it has no right to be as good as it is. I was mind blown. Like, the performance is incredible. Tom Cruise is just one of my favorite actors. And the action, the plane sequences, the third act, everything is just wonderfully crafted. My number two for the worst movies of the year is Studio 666. I contemplated leaving the theater for this. I never leave the theater, but I felt like this was such a massive waste of my time that I almost couldn't justify finishing this. It has some of the worst acting ever. I have barely ever seen worse acting than in this movie. I will say it's a horror movie. Some of the scares are actually pretty effective. But the acting and the dialogue and the style and the story is just absolutely god awful. My number two for the best movies of the year is Everything Everywhere All at Once. And this was actually the last movie I saw of the year. I had seen it before, and at that point, it was actually out of my top 25 for the year. But upon rewatch, and I knew this after I had seen it the first time, it was just a little too much to take in all at once. Little pun. It was just way too much to take in, but I knew that upon rewatch, it would get much better, and it certainly did. This movie is bonkers crazy, and it manages to take so many themes and storylines and twists and whatever you want and just cram it into one movie and make it work. Every single theme and storyline just blends together perfectly and suits each other and makes everything better. It's emotional, it's entertaining, it's funny, it's got incredible diverse acting. Just a phenomenal, one of a kind movie. And my number one for the worst movies of the year is Beavis and Butthead Do the Universe. I am not a Beavis and Butthead fan. I have never seen Beavis and Butthead before. Maybe I shouldn't have seen this before I've seen Beavis and Butthead. Who cares? I have no idea why these characters are popular, why anyone think they're funny. It's some of the most immature and unfunny thing I've ever seen. I barely even have words to describe it. Like the story is terrible, and Beavis and Butthead are just so utterly unlikable and so utterly annoying that I wanted to throw something at the TV watching this. It's so terrible. I have no words to describe it really, other than the ones I've used. And my number one of the year, if you haven't figured it out already, finishing on the highest of highs, The Batman. I loved this the first time I saw it. It wasn't my number one the first time. I felt like watching the first time, it was an incredible movie, an incredible story, incredible everything. But I've just been so used to seeing Christian Bale as Batman, Michael Caine as Alfred, and so on and so forth. So it took a bit of time to adjust to Robert Pattinson and Andy Serkis and everyone else. They were all great, but it felt weird to begin with. But upon rewatch, this is just the perfect Batman movie. I loved every single second of this movie. And it's not just getting to see Batman as a detective. Everyone has talked about that. It's the actual mystery that is just phenomenal. It's the supporting performance from Paul Dano that's just incredible. Like he's also someone who's just had a fantastic year. This is just the perfect movie, really. There's not much more to say. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like what you saw, please consider hitting the like button, the subscribe button, every single button you can possibly find, except the dislike button. I know the quality isn't the best on these videos. I know I'm not the best YouTuber ever out there. I just love talking about movies. I love doing this, and I want to be able to do it more. So if you like what you saw, please help me out and hit the subscribe button.